Australian Jock Palfreeman has spent the past decade as a prisoner in a Bulgarian jail. Now, last week Palfreeman was granted parole for good behaviour. It sparked protests and a nationwide backlash, and now his fate hangs in the balance. In a rare interview with reporter Nadia Daly, his parents are calling on Prime Minister Scott Morrison to intervene.
For the past 11 years, Jock Palfreeman has been locked within the walls of this Bulgarian prison.
Get back, step away. Get back, step away.
He was arrested in 2007 after fatally stabbing a student during a brawl on the streets of the capital, Sofia. The news stunned his father Simon and stepmother Helen.
You don't want that call in the middle of the night to say that something's gone terribly wrong.
It was incomprehensible, really, to begin with.
How you going?
It wasn't until I actually got to Sofia in January of 2008 that I realised just how bad things had got.
Most of the times I feel I wish it was me who had died on that street.
Jock and his family have always maintained he was acting in self-defence. Simon and Helen attended his trial, where he was convicted of murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison.
It was absolutely, a very, very hard period in our lives, I have to say.
Every day is a struggle and a fight. Some of them quite serious. There have been beatings and all sorts of things in prison.
Now his parents have their first glimmer of hope in a decade after Jock was granted parole for good behaviour halfway through his prison term.
It was quite an ecstatic moment. It was, finally some justice for Jock.
There was some hope that he might in fact be coming back to Australia.
But the news of his early release was met with outrage in Bulgaria. Protesters and the country's Prosecutor General are calling for the decision to be overturned and for Jock to remain behind bars.
It's been a roller coaster.
It's pretty devastating,
it is
really.
yeah.
Devastating. I think, it's the bad old days again, and only worse because we did have that moment of hope. And I think, it's really a terrible feeling to think that, he was almost on that plane. Now it's looking increasingly grim. So I think he's had some very some high moments and some extremely low moments.
Bulgarian reporter Kristiana Stefanova says the intervention by the country's chief prosecutor is highly unusual.
The guy has convicted of murder. He went to jail. He spent their half of their time, and they go out, and then they want him back in jail. That's the first case that I know that's in Bulgaria.
While Jock Palfreeman has been transferred to immigration detention, all his family can do is wait. What's it like being here in Australia while all this plays out in Bulgaria?
That's been incredibly stressful. And I have to say, haven't slept a lot for the last 4 or 5 nights, because having Jock's life in so many other hands, and you can see all the hope disappearing, it can be very difficult.
Lots of people have been emailing in.
They want the Australian government to do more to advocate for their son's release.
I really would like the Australian government to be a bit more public in their support of Jock.
In a statement, the Department of Foreign Affairs says Australian consular officials are assisting Jock Palfreeman and are talking with the Bulgarian government. Foreign Minister Marise Payne is expected to talk with her Bulgarian counterpart in New York this week.
Every Australian who has children that travel overseas would hope that their government would come out and really stand up for them.
What do you want to see Australian authorities do right now?
It does really require someone like our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, to actually speak out on behalf of Jock and even pick up the phone and maybe have a talk to Mr Borisov.
When Jock is released from prison, what's the first thing you want to do together?
The first thing we want to do together is have a beer on his grandfather's veranda.
With his grandfather there?
With his grandfather there.
So all three generations will be...
All there, yep, absolutely.
Jock's father is holding out hope that day won't be too far off.
Through all this, he actually is my strength. It was pretty devastating to think that he was almost back, and then suddenly there's this another development where they're trying to block him coming home. He was quite positive and strong about it. He said, look, I've always got a plan B, I'll make it. That's what actually gives me strength too.
It's amazing strength, isn't it? You feel for the family and for Jock himself. That was Nadia Daly reporting there.